Have you ever felt in silence that there is something bigger behind the story that was told? That there are missing pieces in the millennia-old puzzle of Jesus' life and those who walked alongside him? What if, among the apostles, there were some who carried an ancient secret, not only from earth, but from the stars? Most of us were introduced to the traditional image of the disciples, ordinary men and women, transformed by the divine touch of an earthly master. But what if some of them were already attuned to realities far beyond this world? Could they be bridges between worlds, messengers of something that history chose to hide? In the vastness of time, the birth of Jesus represents an explosion of consciousness, but few question who was truly ready to fully understand him. Among those who followed him, were there some who not only witnessed miracles, but understood them with the clarity of those who already recognized the subtle laws of the universe? There are scattered clues, subtle, yet insistent, that certain disciples had a vision that went beyond common faith. They knew, or at least they sensed, and what they knew could change everything we think about the role of Christ and his mission on earth. In various ancient cultures, beings considered divine descended from the heavens, bringing wisdom, healing, and transformation. This narrative repeats itself in the myths of Sumeria, Egypt, Vedic India, and so many other civilizations. So why not consider that the story of Jesus is also embedded in this cosmic context? Could it really be that he was understood by all who followed him, or just by those who silently carried within them a stellar memory? Not a memory of books, but a wisdom that sleeps in the heart of those who have walked among worlds. The idea of stellar disciples might seem strange at first glance, but it becomes less fantastic when we look at the Gospels with a symbolic, rather than literal, perspective. Jesus spoke in parables, used metaphors and codes. He even said, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." This was a subtle invitation to those who could decode a higher language. Could this language have been, in fact, directed towards consciousnesses that were already partially awakened? Consciousnesses that perhaps had never completely forgotten their celestial origin. This is not a modern theory, born out of interest in aliens and pop spirituality. Many medieval mystics, Kabbalists, Gnostics, and Sufis pointed to this interplanetary dimension of the soul. For them, certain beings came to Earth with specific missions, already connected to sources of knowledge far beyond common capacity. If we look at it from this angle, some of Jesus' disciples did not come to convert, but to remember. To remember who they were, where they came from, and why they were here. Another point that invites reflection is the way in which certain disciples stand out in the gospel narrative without necessarily being in a position of power. John, for example, appears as the one whom Jesus loved the most. Why? What was in him that provoked this silent intimacy with the Master? Was it just human love, or energetic affinity, like between two beings who share a stellar origin? These details, so simple at first glance, become gigantic when revisited with more attentive eyes. Throughout the centuries, the institutional church chose to preserve an accessible and orthodox model of the figure of Jesus. This made sense for propagating ethical and universal values. However, in the name of simplicity, many esoteric and cosmic aspects were omitted or labeled as heresy. Documents considered dangerous were suppressed. Among them, Apocryphal and Gnostic texts that revealed extraordinary visions of Christ's mission and of his closest followers. Those who have read these pages know there are unsettling truths within them which directly engage with the idea of the star disciples. This quest is not new, nor is it marginal. Thinkers such as Carl Jung, Rudolf Steiner, and even Teilhard de Chardin have each, in their own way, touched on the idea of a cosmic consciousness operating silently through certain historical figures. They were not talking about science fiction. They were discussing an expanded spirituality, where Earth is not the center of the universe, but one of many points where light manifests. Within this logic, Jesus would be a universal Christ-like emanation, and his disciples, conscious satellites of this same field of light. What makes everything even more intriguing is the contrast between the mystical knowledge and the outward simplicity of the disciples. Many of them were fishermen, peasants, women rejected by society. And yet some understood Jesus in a way that even the doctors of the law could not. This leads us to ask, what is needed to understand an enlightened being? An academic title or an awakened soul? The story of these disciples suggests that the real connection was not with dogmas, but with vibrations, with frequencies. This first part of our dive is in fact a call to investigation, to deep listening, to the abandonment of rigid certainties. We are not here to deny what we have been taught, but to expand, to add, because perhaps by combining history with cosmic spirituality, we are closer to the essence of what Jesus wanted to teach. Not just to love, but to remember. Remember who we are, and who among us already knew this 2 millennia ago. The mystery of the star disciples is not resolved with an answer, but with an openness. A crack in the mind and heart that invites us to contemplate the possibility that Jesus' mission may have been much greater than we imagined, and that, among those who followed him, there were consciousnesses already prepared for what would come not only in this world, but in many others. Worlds that perhaps already call us by name, and that we are now beginning to hear. And so, with this subtle call, we open the doors to everything that is yet to come. The upcoming chapters of this journey will lead us to forgotten documents, hidden interpretations, and fascinating characters who may carry within them the fragments of the stellar truth. Now that the seed has been planted, the echoing question is, are we ready to see with new eyes? What happens when books containing the key to a higher truth are left out of the official history? When the canon is sealed, but ancestral voices continue to echo through the rejected texts. We are talking about the so-called apocryphal texts, gospels and writings that, although not recognized by the institutional church, carry a spiritual charge as intense or more so than those included in the Bible. And among them, fragments emerge suggesting something more, a connection between Christ and cosmic realities, far beyond the linear understanding of the ancient world. The discovery of Nag Hammadi in 1945, in the desert of Egypt, was an explosion of revelations. A clay jar hidden for centuries brought to light over 50 Gnostic texts. There were different versions of creation, speeches attributed to Jesus never seen before, cosmic visions about the human spirit, and above all, clues that some of his followers understood invisible dimensions. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, is one of the most intriguing. In it, Jesus does not perform miracles, but delivers secrets to those who are capable of listening. And the secrets are not of this world. In one of its most mysterious passages, the Gospel of Thomas presents Jesus saying, "I am the light that is above all. I am the whole. The whole came from me, and the whole will return to me." This is not about a moralistic teacher or a social reformer, but an entity expressing itself as a cosmic source. Those who followed him and understood this language were perhaps aware of the spiritual vastness this represented. And here begins to take shape the figure of the stellar disciples, not mere listeners, but receivers of codes. Another powerful text is the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. In it, she recounts visions she had after Jesus' ascension. Unlike the traditional narrative, Mary is not treated as a mere follower. She is a counselor, interpreter, and has dialogues that demonstrate a deep understanding of the intermediate world between the physical and spiritual. There is even mention of levels of consciousness and celestial spheres, something that resonates strongly with modern accounts of interdimensional experiences. Could Mary have been an awakened consciousness, one among those who already accessed information from other spheres? These writings were not excluded due to a lack of relevance, but because they offered an image of Christ and his disciples that eluded the control of religious authorities. They presented a spirituality that did not depend on rituals, temples, or intermediation. They spoke of self-knowledge, inner light, and multiple planes of reality. Many Gnostics believed that the human soul was, in fact, a spark trapped in a body, and that the true purpose was to return to the higher dwellings, where the aeons, beings of light, awaited. These aeons, for some scholars, are interpreted as cosmic consciousness or even interplanetary entities. The term aeon, in fact, has origins that transcend Christian vocabulary. It appears in Hellenistic and Persian currents, describing universal intelligences that operate in multiple dimensions. These beings are not gods in the anthropomorphic sense, but aspects of the divine mind, fields of energy and wisdom that guide spiritual evolution. Some disciples, according to Gnostic texts, not only believed in them, but also communicated with these beings, and they did this in altered states of consciousness through visions, dreams, and silent revelations. The Gospel of Philip, another fascinating text, presents a statement that resonates deeply with the idea of the star disciples. The truth did not come into the world naked, but in symbols and images. The world cannot receive it in any other way. This is the key. The deepest teachings of Jesus were delivered in code, as if he knew that only a few, perhaps those with cosmic memory, would have eyes to see beyond the words. This symbolic language is a constant feature in the apocryphal texts and connects with esoteric traditions from around the planet. There are also recurring references to the view from above and the descent of light in passages of these texts. For contemporary scholars, these terms point not only to spiritual revelations, but also to possible descriptions of interdimensional contacts. The descent of light can be understood as a manifestation of higher entities, just as the view from above indicates the perspective of those who are no longer bound by the limitations of earthly consciousness. These fragments suggest that some disciples experienced elevated states of perception, perhaps guided by beings already living in other layers of reality. When we broaden our perspective on these writings, we notice a pattern that cannot be ignored. There is a persistent effort to describe the spiritual journey as a return, not just to the divine, but to the origin, to the place where the soul came from. The Father of all sent the Son to remind us who we are, say the Gnostic texts. And what if this Father is not just a theological image, but a reference to a universal consciousness, possibly non-local? What if the disciples understood this, and therefore followed Jesus not as a prophet, but as a key to returning to their true home? It's also important to note that these documents were found hidden, protected from time and destruction. Whoever kept them knew their value. They weren't buried by chance. They were preserved for the future, perhaps for this time. A time when human consciousness begins to open up again to the possibility that life is much more vast than we learned from books. The star disciples, then, wouldn't be legends, but pioneers, keepers of a greater truth, kept alive through veiled words. The exclusion of these texts created a spiritual gap, but today this absence becomes a portal. Each recovered fragment, each deciphered line, brings us closer to a spirituality that does not divide heaven and earth, but integrates them into a single landscape of consciousness. And it is precisely in this landscape that the star disciples moved. Between planes, between worlds, between revelations. They saw Jesus with the eyes of the Spirit, and for this reason, they understood what words could not contain. Therefore, looking at the apocryphal texts is more than a historical exercise. It's a reunion, a gesture of reconnection with aspects of the truth that were silenced, but not destroyed. And it is from them that we continue our journey, now with new eyes, because perhaps in the silence of these forgotten Gospels lies the echo of a stellar story that still pulses within us. Few names carry such symbolic density in the Gospel as John and Mary Magdalene. Both are central figures at crucial moments in Jesus' journey, but what few realize is the unique nature of their presence. Unlike other disciples, their speeches, silences, and actions are not limited to admiration for a human master. They demonstrate something more subtle, deeper, a recognition. As if they already knew who Jesus was, even before the crowd understood him, as if they had already met him on other planes. John, referred to as the beloved disciple, is often depicted as sensitive, introspective, and deeply spiritual. Interestingly, he is the only evangelist to begin his narrative with a clearly cosmic view. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This is not a historical introduction. It is a metaphysical statement, an echo of the oldest esoteric traditions, which see the universe as a manifestation of consciousness. The choice of words reveals the perspective of someone who sees beyond the surface, someone whose soul may have already walked among the stars. While the other Gospels emphasize earthly events, healings, miracles, persecutions, the Gospel of John is saturated with symbols, hidden layers, and elevated spiritual concepts. Jesus is not just the Son of God. He is the light of the world, the bread of life, the true vine. Metaphors that point to inner realities, to states of consciousness, to universal truths. John writes as if channeling. His words resonate with the language of mystical schools such as Kabbalah, Hermeticism, and Pythagorean philosophy. Is it possible that João, with his elevated language and refined perception, was a disciple aware of other worlds? That he understood Jesus not just as a messianic leader, but as an emanation of something greater, an incarnate stellar intelligence? Many mysticism scholars believe that João operated in altered states of perception, perhaps facilitated by spiritual practices still little understood today. Some say he accessed supersensible realities through what we would today call interdimensional visions. On the other side of this mystical axis is Mary Magdalene. Far beyond the misguided image of a repentant woman, she emerges in the apocryphal texts as an initiate, a master, a figure who understood Christ in a way that no other disciple seemed to reach. In the Gospel of Mary, it is she who comforts the others after the death of Jesus. It is she who speaks of soul journeys, of the ascension of consciousness, of liberation through knowledge. She not only witnessed events, she interpreted them with uncommon depth. Mary Magdalene may represent the feminine aspect of gnosis, the intuitive silent knowledge that recognizes truth not through logic, but through vibrational resonance. In many esoteric circles, she is considered a priestess, perhaps trained in the mysteries of Egypt or the Essenes tradition. Some scholars suggest that she was part of a spiritual lineage that kept ancestral wisdom alive, transmitted orally and strictly protected. Could this lineage be connected to cosmic intelligences, to celestial answers about the purpose of humanity? The encounter between John and Mary Magdalene can then be seen as the convergence of two complementary powers, the word and intuition, the symbol and silence, the celestial and the sacred feminine. In both, there is a reverence not for the external miracle, but for the internal revelation. In their words and attitudes, there are traces of a consciousness that already knew, that recognized in Jesus a familiar frequency, not from past lives on earth, but perhaps from shared realities beyond linear time. There is still one detail that many overlook. John is the only disciple present at the crucifixion, and Mary Magdalene, the first to witness the resurrection, the end and the beginning, the fall of the flesh and the ascension of the spirit, both linked to moments when the veil between worlds becomes thin, where the invisible reveals itself. Were they chosen for their sensitivity, or attracted by a vibrational affinity with what transcends the human? The answer may lie less in the words and more in the vibrations that these stories carry. The Gnostic tradition describes that the awakened soul can recognize another awakened soul, even when embodied in different times and spaces. This leads us to ask, could John and Mary be star souls, sent to Earth to anchor the light of interplanetary wisdom? And Jesus, the catalyst of this light. In this context, discipleship was not a common learning relationship, but a communion of consciousness, a reunion of cosmic travelers on a mission. It's worth noting that, in some esoteric circles, Mary Magdalene was elevated to the status of Christic consort, not as a wife in the earthly sense, but as a vibrational complement to the incarnate Christ. Together they would represent the union of heaven and earth, of the solar masculine with the lunar feminine, of the light of consciousness with the intuition of the soul. A sacred alchemy that transcended human love and pointed towards a fusion of cosmic frequencies. In Hansel and Gretel, we see mirrors of who we are in essence, those who feel a deep inner calling, who perceive that there is something beyond matter, who recognize certain messages without words being spoken. Perhaps that's why these two figures have traversed the centuries with such magnetism. They touch us not by the logic of religion, but by the reminder of what we already know and forget. They are the first to see, the first to feel, the first to understand, not with the mind, but with the soul. John and Mary Magdalene may have been the first fully conscious star disciples, and as we explore their journey, we get a little closer to our own origin, because recognizing the light in another is above all a sign that this light already pulses within us. Most people read the Gospels as historical accounts, as if they were merely records of physical events, miracles, speeches, and encounters. But there is another way to read these texts, not with the eyes of the flesh, but with the vision of the soul. Under this perspective, Jesus' teachings reveal themselves as a deeply symbolic language, speaking more to the spirit than to the intellect. It is a vibrational code, a frequency of wisdom that can only be understood by those who are in tune with it. And this is precisely where the idea of a language of the stars is born. Jesus often spoke in parables, not out of didactic convenience, but because there were truths that could only be conveyed in a veiled manner. To you has been given the knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not, he said on one occasion. This distinction between common listeners and spiritual initiates already reveals that his teachings operated on layers. The same speech given to all was understood in different ways. And perhaps among the crowd, only the star disciples were capable of capturing the full message, for they already recognized that vibration as familiar. Many of these teachings point to something beyond the physical world. When Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven that is within you, he breaks with the idea of a geographic heaven and points to an inner and multidimensional reality. This kind of statement strongly resonates with esoteric traditions that describe the human being as a multidimensional being, capable of accessing higher levels of existence. It is precisely this perspective that aligns Jesus' teachings with the stellar language, a wisdom that leads the soul to expanded realities beyond time and space. The symbolism used by Jesus, light, bread, living water, path, truth, was not new, but it carried ancestral meanings present in wisdom cultures spread across the globe. In the Egyptian tradition, for example, bread represented spiritual nourishment. Living water, in Vedic cultures, was associated with the life force flowing between worlds. By using these symbols, Jesus not only communicated with the humble of his time, but also encoded his message in a universal language, accessible to those who carried the ancestral memory of stellar wisdom. The geometry present in his gestures, the rhythm of his words, and even the use of silence in his encounters were expressions of a harmonious intelligence, very similar to that of the masters of the ancient initiatory schools, such as Pythagoras and Hermes Trismegistus. They also used symbols and archetypes to express cosmic truths. Just like the initiates of these schools, Jesus seemed to know that the visible world is only the surface, and that real learning occurs on subtle planes. His words were doors, but one needed to know how to cross them. The star disciples were perhaps those who knew how to cross these doors. They didn't need literal explanations, for they already understood the internal maps. Each phrase from Jesus activated forgotten memories, resonated with untaught truths, but remembered. When he said, "You are the light of the world," he wasn't speaking metaphorically, but in energetic reality. He was reminding those disciples of their luminous origin, of the divine spark that connected them not only to the Creator, but to a universal field of consciousness from which they came. It is noteworthy that at various times, Jesus would separate himself from the crowds and share teachings with only a few disciples. This wasn't exclusion, but calibration. Not everyone was ready for certain truths. In more intimate circles, he spoke of his origin, not of this world, about returning to the Father, about dwellings with many dimensions. These are expressions that only recently began to make sense in light of quantum physics, contemporary spirituality, and reports of interdimensional contact. It was as if Jesus was preparing those disciples for a return to the starry origins of the soul. Another curious point lies in the accounts where Jesus climbs mountains to pray and returns transformed, with a radiant face. This phenomenon, described with astonishment by the disciples, recalls accounts of encounters with beings of light, or even experiences where human consciousness merges with higher vibrational planes. The Transfiguration on Mount Tabor, for example, where Jesus appears alongside Moses and Elijah in glorious form, is an event that defies any purely theological explanation. It suggests a dimensional transition, and the disciples who witness such a scene change forever. The Gospels also report that Jesus knew what was in people's hearts, and that he knew what was to come. This indicates a perception beyond linear time, a kind of expanded consciousness, characteristic of beings operating outside the common space-time matrix. This ability to access the unified field of information is described by mystics from various cultures as an attribute of beings that come from other dimensions, or from more evolved worlds. Jesus seemed to manifest exactly this kind of perception, and those who were close to him, like John and Mary, seemed to understand this functioning. There is a depth to the shortest phrases of Jesus that is only revealed when contemplated in meditation. "I am the way, the truth, and the life" is a phrase that can be read as a Trinity code, a map for cosmic reconnection. The way, movement, inner pilgrimage; the truth, essential wisdom; and the life, universal vital force. This triad appears in countless wisdom traditions, and when spoken by someone like Jesus, it acquires the power to activate deep levels of consciousness in those who hear it, especially in those who already carry stellar records in their energy field. All of this indicates that Jesus not only came to teach how to love, but how to remember. Remember who we are, where we came from, and where we are going. His discourse was not just ethical or moral, it was cosmic, a living language, full of codes to awaken the soul. And some disciples were already prepared for this reception. They recognized the Master, not only for what he did, but for what he emanated. They were perhaps awakened souls in human bodies, stellar fragments reincarnated to accompany the mission of a being whose presence broke the boundaries of the planet. Therefore, when we talk about the language of the stars, we are not referring to an alien language or a code lost in distant galaxies. We are talking about a vibration that echoes deep within the soul, one that is recognized without words and activates when it encounters a similar frequency. The star disciples understood this language because they already knew it. They did not come to learn, they came to remember. And by following Jesus, they were not merely walking alongside a master, but responding to the call of a brother of light. Among the most extraordinary narratives in the scriptures, 3 names stand out for their mystical uniqueness: Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek. Each of them breaks with the linear logic of biblical stories, as if their roles were not limited to time and space. Their appearances and disappearances, their words and actions, suggest something beyond human. Would they be prophets on a mission? Yes, but perhaps more than that. Non-earthly consciousnesses, manifestations of a higher plane incarnated to fulfill strategic roles in the spiritual evolution of humanity. Let's start with Enoch. He is briefly mentioned in Genesis as someone who walked with God and was no more, because God took him. Such a simple phrase hides one of the greatest mysteries of the Judeo-Christian tradition. Enoch does not die, he is taken. And in the ancient apocryphal texts that bear his name, such as the Book of Enoch, we discover that his departure was not symbolic, but physical and cosmic. He is taken by beings described as angels or watchers, led to the heavens in vehicles of light, and instructed about the secrets of creation. The accounts from the Book of Enoch are so detailed that they don't seem like symbolic visions, but rather descriptions of real experiences. There are records of travels to other celestial spheres, contacts with beings of light, star maps, and even descriptions of planetary movements that surpass the knowledge of the time. Enoch is presented as an intermediary between worlds, someone chosen to deliver messages from the original source to a humanity in transition, which leads us to the question, was this rapture a spiritual ascension or an interdimensional withdrawal? The second character who defies natural laws is Elijah, a powerful prophet, defier of kings, and channel of miracles. But what is most striking is his end, or rather, his transmutation. The second book of Kings narrates that Elijah was taken to heaven in a whirlwind of fire, in a flaming chariot drawn by horses of fire. This description does not seem symbolic. It seems visual, literal, an eyewitness trying to describe something beyond their comprehension. Perhaps a luminous ship, perhaps a passage between dimensions. Elijah, like Enoch, does not die. He departs. The parallel between Elijah and Enoch is so strong that in some mystical traditions, it is believed that both continued their mission on higher planes. It's no coincidence that they appear together in esoteric interpretations about the keepers of time and the watchers of the path. Both are described as conscious, alive, acting outside of time, waiting for the moment to return when humanity is ready. This idea aligns with doctrines from various cultures about ascended masters, beings who have surpassed the cycle of death and live in subtle bodies, guiding the spiritual destiny of the earth. And then we have Melchizedek, the most enigmatic of the three. He suddenly appears in the story, blesses Abraham, is referred to as the King of Salem, peace, and disappears. There is no mention of his origin, genealogy, or death. In Hebrews, he is described as without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, made like unto the Son of God. This is not a human title. It's an interdimensional definition. He is called an eternal priest, bearer of an order that predates Judaism itself. The order of Melchizedek in esoteric traditions is a brotherhood of cosmic consciousness in service of planetary ascension. Many mystics believe that Melchizedek is not a name, but a title, a consciousness that manifests at different moments in history to activate critical points in human evolution. For some, he was the same spirit that incarnated as Enoch and later as Jesus. For others, he is a being of light who operates behind the scenes, sending emissaries to Earth when the cosmic balance is at risk. In both cases, he does not belong to the common cycle of humanity, but interacts with it purposefully, wisely, and precisely. These three figures therefore not only touch the sacred, they dissolve the boundary between the earthly and the stellar. They are living bridges between worlds. In their stories we see a pattern. They are beings that mysteriously emerge, possess wisdom beyond the ordinary, interact with celestial forces, and depart in non-human ways. Are they precursors to Christ? Guardians of revelation? Or perhaps the first stellar disciples to act before the coming of Jesus, preparing the Earth's energy field to receive an even greater consciousness? It's important to remember that in the episode of the Transfiguration, Jesus appears in glory alongside Moses and Elijah. This is not a random choice. It's as if the pillars of tradition, Moses as the law, Elijah as the prophet, and Jesus as the light, align in a moment outside of time. A moment when portals are opened, and human consciousness is invited to contemplate eternity. The presence of Elijah in this event strengthens the idea that these beings continue to operate among us, invisible, but not absent. Other traditions suggest that Enoch and Elijah would be the two anointed ones mentioned in the book of Zechariah, the two olive trees and two candlesticks of Revelation, cosmic witnesses who will return in the end times. This refers to a universal pattern, the cyclical coming of stellar beings to Earth in times of transition. Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek would not be mystical exceptions, but part of a larger plan. A plan that Jesus, as the ultimate representative of Christ consciousness, came to expand and fully manifest. In light of this, we begin to see that the star disciples did not just appear in the days of Jesus. They existed before, silently shaping the spiritual history of the planet. They are echoes of an ancient lineage, not recognized by institutions, but felt by all who hear the inner call. Enoch, Elijah, and Melchizedek are beacons of this lineage, living memories of a time when heaven and earth walked together. And now, in times of collective awakening, their stories resurface, not to entertain us, but to remind us that we are not alone, that we are part of something much larger, and that the stars, far from being distant, are deeply intertwined with our origin. Those who walk with the light know the language of the infinite has always been written in our history. We just need to learn to decipher it. Long before the advent of modern science, ancient civilizations already knew that the universe followed an invisible harmony. They didn't have telescopes or satellites, but they noticed that stars, bodies, cycles, and sounds all obeyed the same hidden pattern. This pattern was sacred geometry. It wasn't an academic discipline, but a living language. And where there is language, there is communication. In other words, geometry was a form of dialogue between worlds, and those who knew its symbols understood the gateways of consciousness. In the hidden teachings attributed to schools such as those of Pythagoras, Hermes Trismegistus, and the Egyptian traditions, geometry was considered a divine science. The circle, the triangle, the spiral, the dodecahedron, all represented not just shapes, but universal principles. They expressed the order of the cosmos, the logic of creation, and served as maps for the soul's return to its stellar origin. Some disciples of Jesus, particularly those familiar with the Hebrew and Egyptian mysteries, carried this knowledge in silence. It was not what they said, but what they knew that distinguished them. The very creation of Solomon's temple, according to biblical and Kabbalistic accounts, followed measurements that reflected sacred geometric principles. The dimensions of the Holy of Holies, the arrangement of the columns, the numerical sequence of the elements, everything obeyed a higher order. This was not merely functional architecture, it was energetic construction. The temple was a condenser of cosmic energy, a point of intersection between the divine and the earthly. It is possible that Jesus, as an initiate, deeply knew this, and the disciples who understood him the most might have been familiar with this invisible geometry. A hint of this awareness is seen in Jesus' actions when confronting the traders in the temple. That scene, often viewed as an act of ethical indignation, can also be interpreted as a defense of a profaned sacred space. The temple was more than a place of worship. It was an energetic vortex, a point of alignment between heaven and earth. Jesus recognized this. He even said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will rebuild it." And although he was referring to the body, the analogy reveals his understanding that the body is also a geometric temple, a sacred microcosm. In the Kabbalistic tradition, the tree of life represents a map of consciousness and the universe. Each sphere, is a station of being, a frequency, an access point. This structure is geometric, and it is no coincidence that some scholars relate Jesus' teachings to this map. He spoke of kingdoms, narrow gates, difficult paths, ascensions. These are all recurring terms in the symbolism of the sacred tree. Those who understood these codes, the stellar disciples, saw not just words, but internal paths being activated. Sacred geometry also expresses itself through sound. The verb, the word, the logos. John, when opening his gospel with "In the beginning was the Word," is referring to this primordial vibration. The word creates. But not just any word, the word with intention, aligned with the correct frequency. In various traditions, sound is a bridge between worlds, and many believe that Jesus mastered the use of the word as frequency. The more awakened disciples, upon hearing him, not only understood, they felt resonances. They were words that vibrated with specific patterns, words that opened internal portals. Furthermore, there are indications that certain places Jesus visited were geographically aligned with planetary energy points. Some call these ley lines, energy bands that traverse the planet and connect sacred sites. Machu Picchu, the pyramids, Stonehenge, and Jerusalem all lie on these lines. Jesus seemed to know where to walk, where to teach, where to heal. Is it a coincidence? Or did he and some of his disciples understand this energy map of the earth? They knew that stepping on these points activated portals. Mandalas, circular figures used in Eastern traditions and also in esoteric Christianity, are another expression of sacred geometry. They represent the whole, the cycle, eternity. Some medieval cathedrals were built based on these patterns: the stained glass windows, the internal labyrinths, the arrangement of the altars. Everything was symbolic. Everything was a code. Geometry was not just aesthetic, it was invocation. And those who managed to meditate on these forms opened internal gateways. Perhaps that's why some disciples had visions, prophetic dreams, and understandings that defied common logic. It's interesting to note that even centuries later, Christian esoteric orders, such as the Rosicrucians and the Templars, continued to study this geometry as a key to spiritual access. They kept this knowledge as a sacred secret, and they always mentioned that it came from a time before Moses and from beyond the stars. What was preserved, therefore, was more than ancient wisdom. It was a direct contact with star civilizations that used the symbol and form as language. Some indigenous traditions speak of dream points, places on Earth where one can cross over to other worlds. They say these doors are not visible, but they vibrate. The human body, when tuned in, can perceive them. Jesus might have known these points. His most sensitive disciples, the stellars, might have as well. They knew that the visible world is only a small fraction of what exists, that behind each stone there is a code, and behind each form, a message. The symbol was alive, the temple was the body, the language was geometry. Therefore, when we explore sacred geometry, we are not just studying proportions or architectural beauty. We are talking about energy maps, vibrational shortcuts, ancestral codes left so that one day we could find our way back home. And the star disciples, those who walked with Jesus, knew this. They did not just follow a master. They followed the resonance of an invisible architecture that reconnected them to infinity. As we unravel the veils over the mysteries of Jesus' mission, an inevitable question echoes in the hearts of those who feel the call. Who were, in fact, the star disciples? Were they specific figures, like John, Mary Magdalene, Thomas? Or was there more, much more, behind the identities that the Gospels preserved? Perhaps we are not talking about names, but about consciousness. Not about biographies, but about frequencies. Beings who vibrated in harmony with a cosmic origin, and who, silently, knew they were here for a specific mission. These disciples did not stand out for status, wealth, or authority. Many were simple, anonymous, invisible to the world's eyes. But there was something in them, a sparkle in their eyes, a non-judgmental listening, a wisdom that did not come from books. They recognized the truth before it was spoken. They felt the presence of Jesus as an energetic activation. It wasn't worship, it was communion. They knew that Christ was an emanation from a larger field of consciousness, and for that reason, they followed him with a respect that was born from the soul, not the mind. It's possible that not all of the 12 apostles were stellar disciples. Some were still awakening, others resisted. But around Jesus, there was a more intimate, deeper circle, where words gave way to silence and teaching occurred through resonance. There were those who had already walked between worlds, those who had dormant memories of other planes, of vanished civilizations, of wisdom schools in the stars. They were not learning from Jesus, they were remembering with him. This group was not composed only of men. Women played a central role in the stellar mission. Mary Magdalene, Salome, and other followers whose names have not survived in official records, but whose presences vibrated in the subtext of the Gospels. They brought the sacred feminine, the spiritual sensitivity, the intuition that grasps what cannot be taught. For many of these souls, the incarnation alongside Jesus was not the first, nor would it be the last. It was a reunion planned in the halls of eternity, a mission orchestrated even before birth. But where are these souls today? If consciousness is eternal and the journey of the soul continues, where does the work of the star disciples echo today? The answer is simple and profound: among us. Reincarnated, scattered all over the world, operating in the shadows, behind the scenes, in silence. Not everyone knows who they are. Many have forgotten, but they feel an inexplicable calling, a constant restlessness, an inner certainty that they need to go home, even without knowing where it is. They are healers, teachers, artists, therapists, dreamers. They are everywhere. These souls continue their mission, now in a different world, but equally in need of light. They are slowly awakening. Some are having mystical experiences, lucid dreams, encounters that seem like coincidences, but are vibrational reconnections with others of the same lineage. They feel an affinity with Christ, but not with religion. They seek something purer, more vibrational, more direct. They are not interested in dogmas, but in truth. And it is this search that guides them back to their original purpose. Many of them have a natural aversion to authoritarian systems, feel displaced since childhood, do not understand the logic of competition, and have an unusual sensitivity to the pain of the world. This is because they carry within themselves the memory of worlds where harmony was the law, where knowledge was collective and where love was not the exception, but the foundation. And upon incarnating here, on a still dense planet, they felt the weight of forgetfulness. But the time for awakening has arrived, and little by little, they are remembering who they are and why they are here. Some of these star disciples reincarnated with specific gifts: energy healing abilities, intuitive perception, telepathic communication, attunement with nature and the stars. These are not skills that are learned in schools, but rather are reactivated through the right contact, the right reading, the right experience. They are codes that sleep in the vibrational DNA. And Jesus, 2,000 years ago, was the great activator of these codes. Today, the same process happens collectively, through the vibration of truth, the light of consciousness, and the meeting of souls that recognize each other. It's not uncommon for these souls to feel a profound affinity with themes related to stars, ancient mysteries, pure spirituality. When they hear certain words, like Enoch, Magdalene, Order of Melchizedek, sacred geometry, stargates, something within them vibrates. A memory awakens. It's as if the soul is saying, "I know this." This recognition is not mental, it's vibrational. It's the echo of the call they once heard in ancient eras, and that now returns, inviting them again to serve the light. And the service continues, but now amidst a humanity that is fragmenting, that is rebuilding, that is seeking answers. Today's stellar disciples do not come to lead armies or build temples. They come to sustain vibrational fields, to open consciousness, to ignite small lights in the midst of darkness. And often they do this without knowing exactly why. But they trust, they intuit, they follow. as they did before alongside Jesus and as they will do again whenever Earth needs to remember that it is not alone. There are also those who are not incarnated, but who operate from subtle planes, mentors, guides, protectors, consciousnesses that communicate through dreams, intuitions, and synchronicities. They accompany the journey of their earthly siblings, whispering reminders, protecting paths, facilitating encounters. This invisible network is part of the same body of light. The stellar mission continues to be active, multidimensional, and interconnected by threads of love, truth, and purpose. Whoever aligns with it, even unknowingly, is already part of the symphony. Thus, the star disciples do not belong to the past. They belong to the now. They are incarnated. They are awakening. They are recognizing themselves. And the most beautiful of all, perhaps upon hearing these words you are among them. Perhaps your restlessness is the call. Perhaps your silent search is the map back to the mission. Because when the truth knocks on the soul's door, there is no more sleep. The time to remember has arrived, and the lineage of light awakens. Throughout the centuries, cultures from all corners of the world have preserved in their myths, scriptures, and rituals the same silent expectation, the return. A moment when the ancient wise ones, the light bearers, the children of the sky, would come back to aid humanity in times of profound transformation. For some, this sounds like legend. For others, like faith. But for those who feel, who vibrate, who know, this is a memory. A remembrance that did not come from books, but from the stars. In the Christian tradition, this return is announced as the return of Christ. But the mistake was to think that it would be just a single physical figure descending from the heavens. What if, in fact, this return is not of a person, but of a consciousness? A frequency that manifests through many. Jesus himself said, "I will be with you until the end of times, and also, I will make my dwelling in you." Could these not be clues that Christ, as a field of consciousness, is now returning through the awakened? This idea resonates with prophecies from cultures much older than Christianity. The Mayans spoke of the return of the star ancestors. The Incas awaited the children of the sun. The Egyptians mentioned the Netjeru, who would one day return to reopen the portals of wisdom. The Hindus speak of Kalki, the avatar of the final transformation. The Jews await the Mashiach, the Muslims, the Mahdi. But what if all these names point in essence to the same thing? A collective return of conscious souls, coming from an older, vaster, more cosmic origin. Today's star disciples, then, are not just awakening, they are gathering. The gathering does not take place in palaces, nor in temples. It happens on frequencies, through encounters that seem casual, but are guided by synchronicity, through words that touch, books that arrive at the right time, videos that awaken, connections that give you goosebumps. They are being called, one by one. And when two or more gather in the name of truth, the light expands. The prophecy of the return is not a future event. It is a process already underway. The children of the stars are activating from the inside out. Each memory, each dream, each synchronicity is a code being reactivated. And when these codes light up, the soul begins to emit a different vibration. This vibration attracts others of the same lineage. This is how they find each other. Not by religion, nor by appearance, but by frequency. A frequency that only those who came from the stars can feel. This meeting is also vibrational on the planet. The Earth's magnetic fields are changing. The sun emits new particles. Cosmic tides bring winds of awakening. Many feel this as insomnia, confusion, extreme sensitivity. But it's not an imbalance. It's an upgrade. It's the soul trying to realign with its original matrix. The portals are opening. Not visible portals, but internal access points. And the star disciples know, when the call comes, it's impossible to ignore. Throughout the ages, there have been other moments of activation. In the Egypt of Isis, in the Greece of Pythagoras, in the Vedic India, among the Essenes, and of course with Jesus himself. In all these moments, star souls incarnated to sustain the light in periods of transition. Now we are living through another one of these moments, and it is global, collective, without a geographical center. The activation is happening everywhere, because never before have there been so many star souls incarnated at the same time. The Earth is preparing for a leap, and they have come to help. Some of these souls are already in a position of quiet leadership: therapists, scientists, artists, teachers, communicators, healers. But they do not present themselves as masters. They do not seek followers. They just live their truth. Others are still awakening, recognizing past wounds as clues to their mission. They know that something sets them apart, even without words. The stellar memory pulses in the blood, in the silence, in the eyes. And when they look at each other, they recognize themselves. Many carry specific traits: an unexplainable nostalgia, a vast love for the earth and animals, an unusual sensitivity to collective pain. Some have recurring dreams about stars, spaceships, luminous civilizations. Others hear words in languages they do not know, but understand. This is not an illusion, it's a memory. Fragments of the soul surfacing. The return of the star children is not physical, it's vibrational. It's as if a forgotten orchestra began to tune its instruments, and little by little the music takes shape. That's why so many today seek deep connection, not with institutions, but with the divine that pulses within. This search is not new. It is the call of lineage. And the response to this call begins with a simple gesture: to remember. Remember that we are not alone, that we have come from far away, that we have been together before, and that now is the time for us to reunite, not to escape from the world, but to anchor in the world the vibration from where we came. The prophecy is alive, not as a fixed script, but as an invitation. With every choice for authenticity, with every step towards truth, the gathering occurs. And when the critical mass awakens, a new frequency will envelop the earth. There will be no more need for spiritual wars, nor for external leaders. Because every conscious being will know, I am part of the light. And the light will recognize itself in every glance, in every gesture, in every breath. So will be the return. Perhaps you feel this now. Perhaps the words resonate as something familiar, because you too could be one of them. One of those who walked with Christ, who heard the original music, who came from the stars to ignite the flame of remembrance. And if this is so, then it is already time. The time to return, not to the past, but to the purpose. The time to gather, the time to remember who you are. There is a voice that whispers in the silence of the deepest nights, a vibration not heard with the ears, but that pulses in the chest, reverberates in dreams, and manifests in a constant restlessness. This voice is not new. It has been with you since before birth. It does not come from outside, though it echoes through the world. It is the call, the stellar call, not to the distant sky, but to the universe within you. The journey of the star disciples, which began millennia ago alongside Jesus and many other masters, did not end with time. It was planted like a seed in every soul that accepted the commitment to carry the light, even when the world darkened. And now, in this time of transition, this seed begins to sprout. Do you feel it? This sense that life is more than routine, more than goals, more than survival? This is the remembrance. This is the beginning of the journey back. The true mission has never been external. It has always been internal. The activation of memories, the awakening of gifts, the recovery of purpose, it all starts within. That's why Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," not as a metaphor, but as a direction. He pointed to the core of being, to the point of light where the original spark resides. And those who followed him with star consciousness knew this. They did not worship him, they recognized him, because they too carried this light. But why do we forget? Why at birth do we pass through the veil of forgetfulness? Because the earthly experience demands depth. And diving into matter requires us to forget, at least for a while, who we are. This forgetfulness is the greatest challenge, and also the greatest proof of love. To love without remembering, to serve without knowing, to trust without guarantees. This is the courage of those who accepted reincarnation, of those who came from the stars to transform the earth from the inside out. And that's why so many today feel lost, misunderstood, disconnected. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the echo of the call. The soul begins to move when the time comes. It may be through suffering, a breakdown, an unexpected encounter, or a video like this one. Something resonates, something touches, and the light begins to sprout, slowly, gently. Because you're not just remembering your origin, you're becoming it again. The inner journey does not require temples, gurus, or doctrines. It demands listening, silence, presence. Every mindful breath is a step. Every choice for authenticity is a gateway. Every act of love is a code. The stellar call resides everywhere there is truth. It does not need to be understood, it needs to be felt. Because it operates in the language of the soul, not logic. And the soul always knows. You don't need to do grand things. You just need to be who you are. That in itself is immense. The vibration of your presence, when aligned with your origin, transforms environments, heals wounds, awakens others. We are walking electromagnetic fields. And when a field aligns with the truth, it creates a field of coherence around it. This is how the star disciples operate. This is how light acts, silent, but irresistible. And the most beautiful thing is that you are not alone. You never were. Others walk with you. Some you have already met. Others are still on their way. But all of you belong to the same invisible lineage, a vibrational brotherhood that reunites beyond words, in a look, in a feeling, in a vibration. And when these encounters happen, something ignites, and it never goes out again. This journey has no external map, but it has an internal compass, and it always points in the same direction, to the center, to the heart, to the point where you stop seeking and start radiating, where you stop asking and start vibrating, where separation disappears and unity reveals itself. This is the true return, the return to what you have never ceased to be. You are light. You are consciousness in human form. You are part of something much larger, much older, much more loving than you were taught. The starry call is not about escaping Earth, but about embodying here in totality, with presence, with surrender. You didn't come to run away from the world. You came to transform the world with your presence. And now, with everything you've felt up to this point, the question becomes inevitable. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to keep it inside you? Or will you let this light touch other hearts? The journey does not end here. It has only just begun. And if you've reached this moment, then you've already heard the call. Now only one thing remains: to answer. Mind Unfettered, now I want to hear from you. If this message resonated somewhere deep within you, when was the moment you felt that you were not of this world? Share in the comments what call you feel in your soul today. Let's manifest together a vibrational field of light in the comments. Each of your words will be like a star lighting the path of another awakened one who is also seeking to belong. After all, we are a network, a vibrational brotherhood, a family that reunites in this present moment. It's not about me, it's about us. And if you felt that this truth has just begun to emerge within you, don't stop here. The next step is already prepared for you. Watch the video on your screen now. The Brotherhood of Light, the secret knowledge of Jesus that history erased. There you will discover what history tried to silence, the ancient wisdom guarded by those who came from the stars, and which now is finally ready to be remembered by you.